So I did my midterm video project on the concepts of power and privilege and the role that they play in the world and classroom. So to define power and privilege, to start, power and privilege are two factors that play an incredibly important role in how our experience of the world will look. Institutional power is defined as the ability or official authority to decide what is best for others, the ability to decide who will have access to what resources, and the capacity to exercise control over others. When these powers are abused and used incorrectly, it is referred to as institutional abuse, which can come in many forms, included but not limited to inappropriate confinement, lack of regular care or personable care, disrespecting a person or group's right to independence, dignity, or choice, deprived or bleak living conditions, inappropriate assertion of power or control, neglectful medical procedures, and physical, sexual, as well as verbal abuse. Power can be gained through having privilege. Privilege is defined as a concept that operates on a personal, interpersonal, cultural, and institutional level that gives advantages, favors, and benefits to members of dominant groups at the expense of target groups. In the United States, this type of privilege is granted to individuals who belong to one or more of the following groups, typically. People who are English-speaking, white, middle-aged, able-bodied, part of the middle or owning class, people who are heterosexual, Christians, or males. One of my sources from the University of Michigan gave this little example of what privilege sort of looks like in a less definitive, straightforward type way. They say to think of a flight of stairs. Stairs are in virtually every building with more than one floor and many outdoor spaces. It is generally assumed that people have the physical ability to walk up the stairs to access higher floors. However, a person with a physical disability that makes them unable to walk upstairs must contend with the assumption that everybody who needed to get up to the second floor would have bodies that could use the stairs. The design of buildings that privileged some bodies contributed to the oppression of others. Why is it important to understand these concepts? Well, it's important to understand privilege, first of all, because we must understand our own privilege in order to appropriately and thoughtfully connect with those who are less fortunate than oneself. The process of becoming comfortable enough to recognize, critique, and accept one's privilege is a challenging one. It is a necessary step, however. Challenging and thinking about one's privilege becomes a part of their consciousness eventually. You recognize and think about it frequently. One of the biggest hurdles to understanding privilege is realizing that, quote, having privilege does not mean that an individual is immune to life's hardships, but it does mean having an unearned benefit or advantage one receives in society by nature of their identity. And that is from one of my sources listed in the bottom of my notes. This concept is referred to as intersectionality. It's the idea that a person can experience both a privilege while also an oppression. One way to think about it is, while you can be straight and white, you might also be living below the poverty line. So your whiteness and that gives you an advantage. However, your oppression is clear that you're living below the poverty line. And it's important to understand power and institutional power, as it can provide an individual with benefits as a result of their possession of privilege. So it's more important to understand how power is given as a result of one's having privilege. This is another example from one of my sources listed below. A professor was discussing institutional power and its abuses through history in her class when two male students protested with statements along the lines of, why do we always have to talk about this, and why are white men always perceived so negatively on history? They didn't feel as though it was fair and they felt that they were being singled out. The professor responded by saying that if they had an issue with it, they could file a formal racial discrimination complaint through the university. The credited professor was in this situation not supported by her institution and instead received a reprimand. The university said that she was targeting students based on their race and sex, and as a result created a, quote, hostile learning environment. This sort of shows an institutional abuse of power as the professor's credibility in this field was not respected by the students or the university, and as a result, she faced punishment where it was not deserved. Our university should have recognized that what she was teaching was simply a matter of historical fact and that these students were not being singled out. So how do these concepts relate to education, and why should educators know these concepts? Privilege and power play a role in the classroom in a number of ways. One of the most common is in the form of varying backgrounds of different students within a classroom. Students who in whichever means cannot identify with others within the classroom may feel as though their ideas and opinions are not held to the same respect as others. Students who do not experience privilege may believe that the teacher will not be able to identify if they are being harassed or being faced with rude behavior. They may also feel as though the teacher would not stand up for them if such actions were occurring. And students who are not privileged may feel as though a teacher and or fellow students who are privileged will be biased against them because of their differences. Teachers must be able to identify with their privilege and be accountable for them as well. It's another reason why it's important for them to understand these concepts. Say for an example, a school board that's predominantly white has the status and power to continue their hold and position, and thus design a curriculum to reflect their values. And doing that gives very little spotlight to other ethnicities on their take on how an educational board should be run. If a teacher is a white, able-bodied male, their students will likely see them as intellectual and a person of authority. If a teacher experiences privilege, their students likely are also experiencing similar regards to privilege. They will not second-guess their abilities or competence. And if a teacher experiences privilege, it is likely that the content being taught in the classroom was written by or sort of like formulated through people of like a similar background. How are these concepts systematic? Systematic means to be under the control or manipulation of a system. Power and privilege can be seen in the ways in which the system organizes and conducts itself. Take the US government, for example. They hold power over the rules and laws regarding life within America. Throughout history, the United States government has abused its power systematically to favor or privilege certain groups of people. One of the ways the US government has done this was through disempowering individuals politically, through sort of not allowing people of African American descent to vote. Up until in 1870, though, it was allowed that all men would be able to vote, including African American men. However, Jim Crow laws throughout the United States sort of inhibited their ability to do this. And even after the Civil Rights Act in 1964, it was still not a smooth transition to allowing all persons to participate in voting. Even recently, these sorts of practices can be seen through actions such as gerrymandering, which is the intentional redrawing of districts or voting districts to favor the political party in power. Moving into how this is one of my other questions. How can educators make their classroom a place that welcomes diversity? They must strive to create an equal and welcoming environment for all students who are a part of their classes. Teachers should hold and value in and adapt to diversity. They should listen carefully to students' stories and experiences and encourage other students in the classrooms to do the same thing. They should use activities and lessons that are inclusive of all and do not single out or oppress or offend students present in the class. They should do research and find materials, books, movies, art, etc. From diverse directors, painters, etc. And relate them back to the coursework, the subject in question, and incorporate them into the lesson. And most importantly, if the teacher makes an error, they should take accountability for it and promise and commit to working towards becoming better and more informed in the future. And then moving on to my last question, takes on the question of why I don't see color as a problematic response when it comes to diversity. This is a question that I came up with myself. I did not come up with it myself. I put it in this section, but I did not come up with this question myself. I had to read an article for one of my other classes, and I found it, and I thought that it was relevant to this project, so I included it. That article is also linked in my sources. I don't see color is a phrase used to attempt to convey a message of racial equality. However, this phrase is quite backhanded. Students who are members of racial minorities are in fact students of color. Membership of their respective racial/ethnic group has a powerful impact on the individual and their identity. It influences their skills and assets and what the student brings into the classroom on a day-to-day basis. When color is not recognized in the classroom, the student can get the impression that the differences that they bring to the classroom are also not valued or respected, especially in the context of a classroom where many students are at an impressionable age. Educators should steer clear of phrases such as these to avoid insulting or offending their students. And that is my whole presentation. Thank you very much.